Ladies and gentlemen, namaste and a very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 169th episode. So today, the next 60 minutes that you are here with us, we'll try to know from our experts for you that how should you be tackling or facing bullies? And most importantly, how should you right now, or what are the measures that you should be taking to avoid being cyberbullied?
Cyberbullying has become more of a topic of relational aggression. And it also is a topic that has to do with students' identity, because they're trying to figure out who they want to be, and online gives them the opportunity to be who they want to be.
The dictionary defines bullying as something to seek, to harm, to intimidate, to coerce. And if I have to look at synonyms, that is persecute, tyranny, and oppress. They are very scary. And that's what bullying is.
We emphasize more on gross national happiness than gross domestic product. So we measure our happiness by how much our people are happy. We measure through this certain indicators that we have in our principle called the developmental philosophy called gross national happiness.
Ladies and gentlemen, namaste and a very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 169th episode. In the last 168 episodes, we have talked to, interacted with nearly 3,000 plus school leaders on this very platform, where they have shared their ideas, opinions, innovations, and what all new are they doing in the education space. So today, the next 60 minutes that you are here with us, we'll try to know from our experts for you that how should you be tackling or facing bullies? And most importantly, how should you right now, or what are the measures that you should be taking to avoid being cyberbullied? Because right now, when we are all attending schools virtually, when there is a post-COVID education scenario that has come up, where going to the physical school has become a typical challenge. When we talk of countries like India, where the population density is very high, we are trying to put in the protocols in place, but all is absolutely in vain. When we talk of countries like the US, where the schools are completely open every single day, there's some or the other case coming up in each institution, and they are tackling it in a completely different way. But across all this, the teens, the students, they have all been exposed to the internet. The virtual world is their world of education now. And when we have given them this ecosystem, have we given them the security mechanisms that they need to take care while they access education virtually? Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. Before we start off, just 2 to 3 more things. Blub World Web Talks is a bilingual platform, so you can use English or Hindi, any of these 2 languages in your conversation. Try sticking to these 2. Please don't use a third one. But if you want, you can, but I won't get it. So try sticking to these 2. Most importantly, think of this as a speaking sprint. It's not a speaking marathon. So once your speaking time is over, you might get muted. If you get muted, please don't get offended. It's just to finish the activity on time and keep it crisp and entertaining for everyone else. Thank you so much, all the amazing speakers, for joining us today. This is an edition of the Blub World Web Talks Global, where we try to bring in school leaders from different countries so that we can create a repository of ideas, innovations in education, and the repository should be relevant beyond boundaries. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 169th episode. Let me invite the first speaker for today to share his perspective on bullying, whether it's physical, whether it's virtual, and how to tackle it or face it. Now, this first perspective comes from a country that we all consider absolutely developed, a country that we all look up to when we talk of the income per capita, a country that we think, in a way, owns the world. I might be wrong in some ways, but I want to make statements that could incite you to say something good. So let me invite Dr. Paul Miller, the CEO for the Green Tech Charter School from Albany, New York, USA. Dr. Paul, over to you for the next 3 minutes. Please unmute yourself, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate being here. My name is Dr. Paul Miller. I'm the CEO and principal at Green Tech High in Albany, New York. I'm also I lead a consulting company where our goal is to change education for kids throughout the world. So I appreciate being here. My first research is on cyberbullying. My first book was on cyberbullying and Black females' experience of cyberbullying in an urban environment. So, as far as cyberbullying and bullying, it's all about an imbalance of power. It's about an imbalance of power. And when there's an unbalance of the scales, that's where the bullying occurs. And so because bullying, traditional bullying was more in person, cyberbullying has become more of a topic of relational aggression. And it also is a topic that has to do with students' identity, because they're trying to figure out who they want to be, and online gives them the opportunity to be who they want to be. And so they have the opportunity to use those powers for good, or they have that opportunity to use those powers for bad. And so they're developing these identities, and their identities often are misinformed, and they're developed on shortened, unearthed relationships. And so because of online being such a quick, fast moving platform, relationships aren't forming the way that they should form. And so there's no trust there. So that with no trust, you also don't have true friendships. And without the true friendships, you're seeing an imbalance of power. You're trying to vie for social status. You're trying to form who you are. And sometimes as underdeveloped youth, their brains are forming them in the wrong ways. And so then conflict arises. And then as adults, it's how do we intervene, and how do we step in, and how do we help the conflict? And it's with where do we intervene and see, because ultimately the youth aren't fully engaged in wanting to be bullied or to bully. They just want to be able to maintain their social status. And what happens is it's eliminating their social status if they don't have some type of what they call clout, or what they call this whole status that is getting or would eliminate them from the popularity that they're looking for. And it's about the like, it's about the views. And so they will do what it takes. And so again, our job as adults is to help them inform and build trustful relationships that can actually go beyond the cyber world and be in person, and remove some of the bullying that's happening by eliminating some of the imbalance of power.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. You actually initiated the talk in the most perfect sense. I would rather say that you added points and elements which need a lot of focus during this complete conversation. I will try to summarize what you said, where you started from. Bullying typically arises or finds its genesis in the imbalance of power. And most importantly, that imbalance of power when it comes into relationships. Because anybody who has the power, how does he utilize it? If he utilizes it in a positive way, it could be a constructive, collaborative team that could work together. If they use it in a negative manner, at that point, it becomes bullying, and you try to force your opinion on somebody else and shut the door for them. And when it happens online, we do not actually go through the complete growth trajectory of a relation. We do not know how that each step or each evoluting step of relationship is happening to us. And when you cannot know that, you don't understand at the end of it that what kind of a power calculation are you in that relationship that you've created online. Then further you talked about conflict resolution as adults. When a conflict arises in these kind of relationships that are not mature enough, that have been made online, that have not lived the span that they must have, that's where when an adult comes in for conflict resolution and the child in some or the other way loses the social status, it hurts him even more. And even that small little act, positive act of conflict resolution, could also be perceived quite negatively. So thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Let me go to the next speaker to add their perspective on cyberbullying and, most importantly, physical bullying. A very warm welcome, Ms. Roja Paul, the principal of Neeraj International School from Hyderabad, Telangana, India. Roja ma'am, over to you for the next 3 minutes. Please unmute yourself, and a very warm welcome.
Good evening. It is thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Daksh, and the Blub World, and my fellow colleagues who also have joined us to give their opinion on it. I would like to say, Ujala Safedi, wow, fair and lovely, or Hawa Hawa, whatever it is. These are the statements that are used in order to connect with somebody that you notice for the first time. Either you connect using a song or something to do with ads such as Fair and Lovely for people who are not as fair as you are or as fit as you are, or whatever the society defines that this is the way we want the society to be. Whatever it is that we wanted, that is what it is. And that is where bullying stems from. I have taught in schools for over 2 decades, and these are statements that we notice quite often. अरे वो लड़की को देख, या वो लड़के को देख, कितना पतला है, कितना दुबला है, कितना मोटा है, कितना लंबा है, कितना नाटा है, क्या नाम है. Everything we choose, everything has to be on account of us. The dictionary defines bullying as something to seek, to harm, to intimidate, to coerce. And if I have to look at synonyms, that is persecute, tyranny, and oppress. They are very scary. And that's what bullying is. Where does it come from? Have we Indians understood democracy, or we have misunderstood, not understood, misunderstood democracy? Right to freedom of speech is something that I can do whatever, I can speak whatever and do whatever. Is that what I have chosen to take? Where does it begin? Well, I want to burst the bubble here. It begins at home, where the young minds, the sensitive minds, watch their parents or older sibling or whoever. And it continues. The show continues in school. Where does it stem from? It stems from the thought that it is, we are all territorial. And the same thing comes for cyberbullying too. I want to make a comment who's dressed what, but we forget that when I am bringing you down, I'm already below you. And I cannot shine brighter by putting off someone else's candle. So bullying is definitely not only at school, even at an adult level, in home, everywhere. So I can call it an evil of the society today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roja. You added the Indian perspective to the complete discussion, that how does India talk about bullying and what happens in our country? Because when we look at India, we all have a societal norm of thinking. Our thinking is framed by the way the society is structured. The schools, the homes, the families that we come from try to, give us a fixated structure of the world. And if we do not fit into that, we are weird. And that's where bullying starts. If you're somebody who's weird, if you're somebody who's not a part of some of the other form of group, then as an individual, you start getting bullied. That's where you try to face the first form of what I can say, segregation. And if I put an even worse term to it, it could be apartheid. And most importantly, this does not start happening in the school. It comes from home. Because at home as well, they're seeing their parents try to pull for power. And when you try to pull for power, that complete battle between people is seen by them, and they learn a lot from it. So we need to focus much more on what are we really feeding them through our actions, not by the content that we deliver them, not by the words that we teach. It's the most important element is our behavior and how our behavior is impacting children. And most importantly, where you concluded, are we really misunderstanding the meaning of freedom of expression? We have the freedom of expression, but do we also have the freedom of criticizing people at any level, at any point of time? This is something that needs to be told, taught, reinforced, evaluated, tested, and reinforced so that children remember it for their lifetime. Thank you so much, Roja ma'am. The next speaker that I'm inviting comes from one of the most happiest countries in the world, comes from the only carbon negative country in the world. A very warm welcome, Mr. Yeshe Dorji, the Vice Principal of Drukgyal Higher Secondary School from Drukharganj, Bhutan. Yesheji, over to you for the next 3 minutes. Please unmute yourself, and a very warm welcome.
Okay, good evening and namaste. Unfortunately, I'm not able to appear on the screen today. Something went wrong with my camera, and I'm really upset with my device today. Anyways, you hear me, Mr. Okay. So once again, warm greetings from the Kingdom of Bhutan and the people of Bhutan, and as you call it, the most happiest country on the world, I guess. Okay, by principle, our country is well known for GNH, the gross national happiness. So this has come from our fourth Duke Galbo, our fourth king. We call it as the Great Fourth. So this has born from his heart, the gross national happiness. We emphasize more on gross national happiness than gross domestic product. So we measure our happiness by how much our people are happy. We measure through this certain indicators that we have in our principle called the developmental philosophy called gross national happiness. So from this perspective, bullies, which comes be it at home, be it in the school, institutions, colleges, or anywhere, maybe in the railway stations, bus stations, or maybe anywhere else. So bully comes in different shapes, it comes in different sizes, it comes in different forms, and then it comes in different verbal, non-verbal, sometimes physical, sometimes mental operation. So this is how we look at bullies typically in schools. We have, in my school, I have around 531 students. And then we often face the same problem, bullies in schools, where we have grades ranging from class 7 to 12. And then most of the time, we can see our younger ones who are from class 7, 8, facing these bullies from the older ones who study in grade 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. So in this case, it has become a very important responsibility for every institution, even being as parents, in order to educate our children, create awareness to our children. What are the traits that actually poses when somebody bullies someone else's? So if you just look at from outside, bullies can be seen as very minute and very small. But when we delve deeper into it, so it causes a mental stress. It snatches away the peace of a person. It gives mental trauma. It does not keep the person in rest. It does not keep the person in peace. It does not allow the person to work in peace, and ultimately letting that person to affect his or her progress, be it in school. For example, the students suffering from bullies, most of the time, they find reluctant to come to school. They are hesitant to share their opinions, express their ideas. We can see in the classrooms, we can notice them. They are found to be inferior in the class. They are found to be inferior in the environment that they are living in. So this is how the bullies actually really hamper and then affect the mentality of a person. The victim really suffers from this mental trauma, this mental oppression when somebody bullies someone else's. So these are some of the dangerous traits that we as elders, being parents, as educators, as the head of the institutions, as teachers, it's high time in this 21st century where the world is being globalized. The world is highly influenced by digital technology, that we need to now control our children. We need to create awareness, and we need to teach our children what are some of the threats that they pose from bullies, either cyber bully or the physical bully or the face-to-face bully. It's high time for us to now educate our children and then make them realize what are some of the consequences of bullies. So these are some of the things that I have to share today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yeshe. And now we have listened to three of the most important speakers for today. So we'll try to now question them or typically put some more points so that we can, take some more ideas and their perspective on the same topic. So it's an open floor now for all the speakers. So if whenever you want to come in, you can just raise your hand or unmute yourself and you can come in on for your comments. So the three people who you just listened to in this call come from three different countries, one from the US, one from India, and one from Bhutan. if you try to define democracy in these three countries, it's a completely different definition. And with a completely different definition of democracy, freedom also gets a different definition. For a US child, his freedom and his freedom in the society is completely different from an Indian child, and it's absolutely different for a Bhutanese child. So, are we teaching freedom right? Or what steps should we be taking so that students understand freedom and at the same point understand the limitations of it? Because the point you tell them that this is your boundary, that's where you really tell them this is your world. Anything beyond this is not valid for you. So are we giving them the right definitions? I want to get Paul into it first and then over to Roja ma'am. Paul, over to you for the next 3 minutes, please.
So when I think of freedom, I think of freedom I think of a movie that's cliche. With great power comes great responsibility. I know it's a little, you think of Spider-Man, right? And so you think of great power, and that's international. You know, everybody knows Spider-Man. So you think of great power comes great responsibility. And so freedom to me is about teaching a kid that freedom is about a state of mind. So freedom is about your mentality and what are you going to do with it? Because even if you're shackled, even if you're hurt, even if you're distressed, it's about you being free of thoughts. It's about programming your mind to have a growth mindset, to be successful above and beyond any situation that you think could happen, and not becoming learned helpless, where you feel like anything happens to you that there's nothing that you can do with it. So freedom in the United States often comes with a very helpless attitude, comes with a very privileged attitude, and freedom is not always looked at as it looks. It's more almost as a right. And so it's, even though it is a right, it's not necessarily always the right thing. And when I say it's not always the right thing, means what you do with your freedom is the choice that you're going to make. And so it's our obligation, again, is to teach our children, to teach our scholars that what are the right things to do with your freedom. How do you become a contributor to your society? How do you become and learn that you got to leave things better than you found it? How do you push past any obstacles that may be put in front of you to overcome them, to really use your freedom in a mindset that helps change the world? And so for me, freedom is all about a mindset. And I will honestly say that within too many times within the United States, the freedom's used the wrong way. And it's not used for the benefit or for the good. And so it's our job as educators to try to change and rearrange that mindset and help people improve and create a growth mindset.
In the US, freedom is typically fought for. Whether you use violence for it, whether you use weapons for it, you need to get your freedom. It's an absolute right, and you have to fight for it every day. When you try to define that same freedom in India, it has to be fought with non-violence. The complete social structure of grabbing onto your own freedom completely changes with India. So how is India teaching its children what is freedom and what are their limitations so that bullying could be minimized in the future at least? Because what we think, bullying normally comes out of a simple thing. If you see somebody who's not similar to you, you think either he has to be suppressed or he'll suppress you.
Absolutely.
So over to Ms. Roja for the Indian perspective on
it. Freedom. Today, when COVID is looming large, haven't we changed the definition of freedom today? Am I free to go to a mall? Am I free to go to a theater? Are the students coming to school today? Are they free to come to school today? Am I free to switch off the video? The freedom has become quite, the definition of freedom has become quite relative. Yes, I did bring about the fact that have we misunderstood democracy? Yes, we have misunderstood democracy. And as I pointed out, and I would reiterate the fact that even the parents have to understand that even when they are giving correction, it has to be understood by the student, it is for correction and it is not intimidation or a power struggle. It is not a power struggle. And that is what comes across to a child, that yes, end of the day, I said it, you do it. That should not be the case. if it is reasoned out, if it is rationalized with the child, and let me tell you, bullying starts at a very young age, as early. I have read a few articles. It starts at the age of 2. So if a child can understand power at that age, he also has the intellect to reason out and rationalize. And I'm sure, and most of, in the Indian context, I would like to say, we think the students cannot think rationally. They do. I would like to tell them and reiterate the fact they can. It is not territorial, it is not geographical, whether Indian, whether US, or whether it is Bhutanese. All of us can understand, because a 5-year-old is a 5-year-old in India, 5-year-old in US, and 5-year-old in Bhutanese. So the growth will be the same. It is how we deal with it. However, because we have a culture, a country which is very rich in culture, where we do revere parents, and that is where the thought comes in. I said it, you do it. Maine bol diya, karna hai. But if we can just add with that cultural aspect and ability to reason and rationalize, if we address it and kind of probably kill it in the very budding stage, I'm sure it will not go to the schools as well, where there is a power struggle. I don't think it will. I don't think it will. Thank you so much.
So 5-year-old in India, a 5-year-old in the US, and a 5-year-old in Bhutan are the same. Their understanding is the same. When they can understand power, they can also understand your rationale of telling them things, not always instructing them. Try to have a conversation. Don't dictate their life to them, that live it the way I'm telling you. And most importantly, when we teach them the concept of respect or reverence, that's where we give the parent a pedestal above the student. We are not ready to talk to him as equals at home, and we want a society to be absolutely functioning with equanimity or equity, which is not possible, because at home itself, we have created that divide. So now let's have a perspective from Yeshe on, you come from a monarchy that's kind of in a much more modernized state now. When you teach freedom to students, when you teach them power, what do you actually tell them? And how does the definition of freedom change for your nation? Over to Yeshe.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Daksh, for your question. Okay, you hear me, by the way? Okay, so freedom in Bhutan, if we look at from the democratic perspective, we did not bargain for democracy. We did not fight for democracy. In fact, the democracy to us is gifted from the Golden Throne by our fourth king, the Great Fourth. No one demanded. We did not have any strikes. We did not have any uprisings. People were in it, expecting that our country should be, for next generations to generations, should be ruled by the king. Everything should come from the Golden Throne. But it just happened otherwise in the year 2008. The freedom is given to people. The king suddenly announced, I am going to abdicate the throne and give the people the freedom. You must exercise the freedom, and I will give the right to exercise your freedom. And in the process of constructing our constitution, so in Article 7, in our constitution, we have 37 articles. In Article 7, it is clearly mentioned that what are some of the fundamental rights of the people. You have the rights to opinion, rights to expression, right to media. So these are some of the different ways and means granted to us by the king through constitution, that how we must exercise our freedom. As Mr. Daksh said, freedom is something that, like Mr. Paul said, freedom is something that it all to do with our mentality. It's all to do with our understanding, our perspective. So see, in freedom in Bhutan, we are morally guided by our constitution, specifically the Article 7, the fundamental right, and then Article 8 we have is fundamental duty of a citizen. So these two articles in our constitution, we are morally guided so that our Bhutanese people do not cross our boundary. We do not encroach, and we do not, we do not we do not need to actually fight for what is freedom that we wanted to exercise. What are we supposed to do? It is clearly enshrined in the Constitution. So the Bhutanese always, since our Bhutan, we are deeply rooted in religion, and at the same time, our guiding philosophy is GNH. So beyond that, our Bhutanese people do not think of. And whenever I teach about this freedom, we go back to early 20th century, where our petty rulers, our regional rulers, had to struggle, fight each other in order to expand their territorial control. And then finally in 1900, our country was finally became a monarchy. And then the first king officially enthroned as the first king of Bhutan. And he was also somehow democratically elected as the first king of Bhutan. All other regional leaders, they democratically and unanimously elected Sir U Gin Wangchuk, the first king of Bhutan, as the king of Bhutan, as the hereditary monarch of Bhutan. And whenever we teach history, so we teach history. We use history as a medium to teach moral lessons, to teach what is our Bhutanese integrity and what is our responsibility, and then what are some of the things that we need to do as a Bhutanese, and then show it to the rest of the world that we can be, though we a small sandwich country between giant India in the south and giant China in the north. So how can we show an example to the rest of the world? Bhutan is a kingdom and people as Bhutanese, which is morally rooted, and then we somewhat a globally outlook in perspective. Thank you so much for this much.
Thank you so much, Yashiji. And yes, you told us the story of Bhutan from becoming a monarchy to finally getting democracy to come into, or rather a modernized monarchy. So the question that I had really raised, or which I would want to bring everybody back to, is when we talk of bullying, Dr. Paul started with a very nice concept of it, that when we are building relationships, at that very point, the seed of bullying or the seed of segregation is also sowed, whether we call the morality of it, whether we call the societal norms of it, whichever way we teach them relations, that's where this all starts. So are we really teaching students relationship building? How does a relationship really come in life, and how do you maintain that? So some ideas from our educators that others can copy, others can understand or emulate within their schools, that how do you teach them relations? Over to Dr. Paul.
So with the relationships and authentic relationships come with being your authentic self. And so often, especially online, what research shows is that the person's persona and their identity online doesn't always match their identity with who they are in person. And so it's about being your authentic self. It's about building relationships. Relationships are all about trust, about honesty, and relationships are about often taking the time to get to know somebody. Whereas this is the generation of immediate gratification. So they want things now. They want it to happen now. They want friendships now. I want 1 million likes. I want 1 million followers. The larger, the better. But often those are not real friendships. Those are people who want to see what you're doing and want to be a part of what you're doing, not necessarily authentic real world friendships. So as an educator, my job is to really try to get kids to slow down and take the time that it takes to build the trust with others and individuals, so you can really get to know people and always give your authentic self. Authenticity is the key to what it is. And so people really get to know you, and then you block out some of the other world and keep your circles a little bit smaller, and don't let people into your circles who may not really be there, who aren't truly your real world friends.
Being authentic, and when you look at instant gratification that this generation wants, and you look at the likes and the kind of friends that you have online, who are all living a completely different life online and a completely different life offline. And one of the speakers in some just 2 or 3 talks before on this very platform shared that when you look at a social media platform, the way it is programmed, the way it is made, the way the algorithms works, you are simply comparing your everyday normal with everyone's perfect. Because people post what's perfect in their life and you compare it with your normal every day. And that's where you start putting a lot of stress on yourself. And that's where you again try to perform because you're not a part of that social group. You're losing your social status. So you're fighting for your social status every single point. You do a small little scroll on a Facebook, Instagram, or any other platform. So why are we self-judging or self-abnegating at every point of time? And are we teaching our students that when you get into the cyber world, when you think of people bullying you, putting some kind of pressure on you, are our students really equipped? What are we doing? What are we teaching them so that they're equipped to handle a virtual world? Over to Mrs. Roja for her opinion on this.
Mr. Daksh, the question is, have we equipped our students to handle the cyber world? It's a yes and a no. Because today's students are digital natives. I may not be, but they are. And like you rightly pointed out, there are two people. So I have a Jekyll and Hyde if I want to call, or I can say I have a Facebook different person and a different face altogether. So are they equipped? Yes, because they are digital natives, they can deal with it. But if your question continues and says that, are they equipped to make relationships? I cannot definitely agree with that, because if in a relationship, like Dr. Paul had pointed out, there is a sense of trust. But when you're looking at the virtual world, can I actually trust everything? Can I trust the age? Can I trust the occupation? Can I trust the face that they have put? Because today, every phone has so many filters. So how do I know this face that I'm showing to you right now is what my face is? So are they equipped? They can be equipped. But if I can actually mention this, equipping comes with experience, or rather proportionality. It is directly proportional to experience. So when I fail today, tomorrow I will not make that error. They will make errors, whether it is virtual or whether it is a real world. They can be taught, but they are far better than us. They're far better than us. I teach grade 10. He knows how to get into government sites. He can hack, and he wants to become an ethical hacker. But if I have to sit to understand whether it is right or wrong, I'm not sure if he's ready, because he lacks the experience or he's not had any failure. So I would like to say they are equipped, and they can be equipped, but they will be better equipped and very well equipped only when they face the failure. Thank you.
Giving them the time to face the failure, do those mistakes, whether it's the virtual world or it's the on-ground real world. But is this also a responsibility of education, that you try to fast-pace experience? When you teach, you simply tell them stories of your experience. So are we really in a position, or do we have the content, the pedagogy, the methodology ready to teach children about relationships, and most importantly, how to not get bullied? So let's take the perspective of Yeshe on this. Yeshe, what do you do in your schools so that children understand relationships better? And most importantly, are you really equipping them in the right manner?
Okay. In our context, what we emphasize more in terms of bullying is, in order to have a very harmonized learning environment and a very conducive learning premises for our children. So through our lessons, we always try to imbibe the values such as cultural diversity. We talk about cultural diversity, and then we talk about ethnic coexistence, and then harmonized society. So through this, we use all the strategies as a mechanism in order to make our children build positive relationship among them, so that this makes them to trust each other, This makes them to become a person with high integrity, honesty, and then they can actually live in a place, in a community where they can share their opinion. And when they share their opinion, they can trust each other, believe each other. And then when they build this trust and this belief to each other, this is how they develop their mindset. And then they have a broader perspective. And then try and understand each other. And then at times, even in Bhutan, we face that our children, most of the time, we find our children glued to all the social network platforms such as Facebook, Instagrams, then messengers, WeChats, so on and so forth. So at times we have seen our children like getting harassed online, sometimes in the school premises, the younger ones are getting harassed by the older ones. And in such cases, whenever such incidences occur in our school, we immediately bring them to our notice and then give them some valuable lessons on how to build a positive relationship among them. And then we also have started in Bhutan, we call it as a peer helper. We call it as a peer helper, where anytime when they are into such situations, they try and help each other. They try and create an awareness among themselves. And another step that we do is whenever we have such victims in the school, let's say cyberbully or let's say a face-to-face bully, we have a full-fledged counselor. So we refer to them, and then counselors take time, try to know the background of that particular problem, and then try and give some necessary guidance and counselings. So these are some of the things that we do in our context. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So a peer helper, building a community that's talking about diversity, reinforcing ethnic coexistence. Now we have listened to all the speakers on their different aspects or opinions that they had about the aspects of bullying. Now we are nearly at the conclusion of this talk, but before we conclude, I would want all our speakers to give us, or all the listeners give at least one idea that they can implement within their institutions, because these talks are majorly listened to by school leaders so that they can understand or typically emulate from you the ideas that you are using within your institution to reduce bullying or giving a better understanding of relationships to children. Over to Dr. Paul.
Yes, so thank you, and I appreciate this time. With this time, I'd like to talk a little bit about the cycle of conflict, especially that was developed here through some of my research in American urban schools. And so especially in urban environments surrounding young Black and females and Black males with this cycle of conflict. So within conflict and bullying, often what happens within the United States is the environments that our youth are growing up in, there's a survival of the fittest attitude. So what happens is that the way that you are not bullied is by able to postulate or able to put yourself in a circumstance where you don't appear weak. So weakness is everything, can definitely harm you, and strength is what helps you and saves you. So what ends up happening very often is, whether it's in person or online, there's verbal disrespect. And then a youth, let's say I disrespected you verbally, then a youth feels the need to save face and retaliate. And so now you're you're balancing, because you said something to me, now I say something back, now we balance it. But what happens is, if one person embarrasses the other person a little bit more, and kind of wins with that argument or with that verbal instigation or relational aggression, then someone here within the United States, it often turns into a term that you're going to have to see me. And so what does that mean? That means like, okay, now we have to have a physical altercation. And so what the research showed is the youth don't want to have this physical altercation. They just want to save face. They don't want to be looked upon or appeared as weak. So what happens is they ultimately find a public place by adults who can stop the altercation, to make this verbal adroitness to try to create a scene so it appears that they're not weak or appears that they're not afraid. An adult intervenes, and when an adult intervenes, if an adult intervenes quick enough, the adult's job, and this is the tip here, is to then mediate, is to hear both people out, mediate, and take the situation on. And when you take the situation, or also like Mr. Dorji said, is that have peer mediation. So that's also an option as well. But looking to take the problem off of the two students and taking it on the adult so they both can save face, so they both don't fall victims to appearing weak within the system. Their safety is conserved, and then they're able to maintain their respect and their social status. So there's this cycle of conflict, and it's like rinse and repeat, and it keeps happening. And as adults, it's our job to intervene and intervene early enough and to build relationships with kids and then build relationships with students in an appropriate way so that they will come to you, so that they're able to help them and teach them the appropriate skills to resolve conflict before the need to comes and maintain their safety and security. And they don't want to lose their survival of the fittest stature. They want to be able to maintain that. And so that's something that as adults, we have to work with them. And I'm not sure if it similarly plays out internationally as well, but I know within the urban environments in the United States, it's something that happens quite often.
The teen normally does not want to retaliate with violence, but they need to save their face. And I think that's where the adult intervention becomes important. And that also in a very positive way, because they have, at the end, the result is that you must be able to create a relationship with the student that if a situation like this arises again, he comes back to you and does not go back to creating that scene or doing that physical altercation. So Mrs. Roja, over to you. Any one idea that you're doing within your institution that other schools can replicate or understand from?
Yes. What we often do when there is bullying, we look at the one who's bullied, or rather the victim, if I may use that word very safely. We look at the victim, but very few, or rather Dr. Paul has very rightly mentioned, we kind of don't complete the circle. We only look at one perspective, one aspect. We don't look at the bully. And I have read a lot of articles, because we've had a lot of counseling sessions at school as well, wherein it is very clearly stated that bully does what he does because he's been bullied at some point in time. Whether it is bully or the somebody who's getting bullied, what is the underlying tone is the sense of insecurity that seeps into either of them. Both. It is, one is insecurity, then the second is the acceptance that I may or may not be accepted. If I have the XYZ, something that is not acceptable, that is when the bully comes in. So we at our school, what we have done is we do it in isolation. We deal with the person who has been bullied and the one who has bullied. And we notice and observe a kind of a pattern. And that is where we do have this aspect in school, something called anecdotal records, wherein we do record and document evidences wherein which is either positive or negative. And when we notice that there is a deviation from positivity to something that is not acceptable, I don't want to use negative, something that is not acceptable, then I have to see, did it stem from home or did it stem? So there is a lot of groundwork one has to do if I'm only not looking at the wound outside, but to address what is it that is causing the bully to do. That is when I will uproot it at the grassroots level. Otherwise, it will continue. So sessions individually with both of them. And we've also chosen to do role play at times, which actually help them understand. Sometimes when you present it to them, they say, okay, what I did there was wrong. So not pointing fingers at anybody, that is actually quite intimidating. So bully continues to do that. So role plays have helped, and counseling and observation. So we don't want to every time say, oh, you did this again, oh, you did this again, but instead develop a pattern as to what has been happening with this particular both. And is it only for this child or this child? So it is basically, we try to, we have a case study, which it helps us to address the problem at the grassroots level. This has helped, especially counseling sessions together, wherein they were allowed to even verbalize at times, probably it's a verbal duel, but in controlled environment under adult supervisions, not using expletives, though it is just to ensure that your anger or displeasure is very maturely expressed. So it has worked wonders. I wouldn't say it has been eliminated, but it's a start is what I would like to say. Thank you so much.
giving both the stakeholders in the bullying process the time to vent it out and under adult supervision, and trying to create an anecdotal record that can be shared with them rather than at every point of time just pointing out their mistake or doing a lot of negative benchmarking. So I think we got two approaches on curative handling of bullying. Now, since, Yeshe, you come from Bhutan, which focuses a lot on happiness curriculum, is there anything that you at your institutions do that other schools can learn, not as a curative measure, but most importantly, as a measure that could do a lot of positive reinforcement? Over to Yeshe.
Okay. You hear me, Mr. Daksh? Okay. So, of lately, we have started with an intervention, so-called mentorship, mentor and mentee. So, of course, in our context, I have around 31 teachers, and then I have around 531 students. And all these 531 students have been divided into 31. So 31 teachers plus 18 supporting staff. So I have a total of around 50 something staff. And when we have divided all the students among this many staff, on the average, each staff, including teachers, they have 12 students. So with this approach, we have started mentorship in order to encourage the students to open up and express, be it curriculum related matter, be it issues in the hostel, issues in the mess, or let's say issues in and around that is happening in their day-to-day life as long as they are in the school premises. So at least in a week, we meet once with our mentees, and then we casually discuss with them, and then we offer them a very open platform to express it out so that we can take in whatever they express, and then we can include all those feedback in our planning, in our in order to modify the certain rules and regulations, and let's say certain things that our school is governed by. So we always look up to our students opening up, and that's why we created a platform so-called mentorship, so that mentees become more open to express, and then they feel more free to speak out to their mentor. Otherwise, in the classrooms, they feel inferior. And then even if they are bullied in the hostels, even if they have faced all this harassment within the school premises, it is very difficult for them to open up in the classrooms to the teachers. Because number one, they are scared of their teachers as a teacher. Normally, students will never open up freely to their teachers. And then when we have just rephrased this word, instead of calling teacher student, we have rephrased as mentorship. So the students feel more comfortable to express whatever issues they have. So this is one unique thing that we are doing in my school. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yeshe. So you basically positioned the teacher into a mentor and mentee so that people start building more closer relationships among students, and you've created small little groups that interact with teachers, open up, talk a lot, and you try to then formulate policies that are more conducive and more stakeholder driven than just the decision maker driven. So today's talk was basically about bullying and trying to understand the different layers of it. So we had these amazing guests coming from 3 different countries, giving you perspectives on 3 different kinds of cultures, thought processes, their understanding of things, and how does the ecosystem of education evolve in different countries. So as we do with all these Blub World Web Talks, we are nearly at the conclusion of it. We always end the Blub World Web Talks with a simple story of a teenager, because we believe in positive benchmarking. Rather than always pointing out their mistakes, tell them what amazing are other teens doing. So one such story for all of you before this call comes to an end. This story comes all the way from Melbourne, Australia. This story is about a girl who started her painting career at the age of 9 months, had a completely sold out painting exhibit at the age of 2. At the age of 4, was invited by one of the most respected art galleries in Europe to again have a sold out house. And at the age of 13, she was invited by one of the biggest art houses in New York, US, to put up an exhibit, and that also was a complete sold out show. And that teenager right now is just 13 years old and is a millionaire and is known as the world's youngest professional painter. And that's Elita Andre, who was on the Blub World's cover page just some months back. And this is what we do every month. Try to find teenagers who are doing amazingly well in life and share their stories with many more teens. Because what we have realized, the best way to teach is not to teach, but to inspire. And since last 1 year, we are trying to bring these amazing teenagers together and build the world's biggest parliament of teenagers that we are calling the World Teen Parliament, a parliament of teens who can solve problems. We'll be funding them, mentoring them, and training them so that they can realize their dreams. We are thankful to our amazing partners, UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute, and the United Nations Kindness Matters Initiative. And I invite all of you, all of your teens, your students, everyone, to be a part of the World Teen Parliament. If they think they can solve a problem, the World Teen Parliament will train, mentor, and fund them. And the only thing that they spend for this is their intelligence. I hope you enjoyed the last 60 minutes. If you did, and if you want to attend the future sessions, open your audio, say a big yes, and thank you so much for being a part of the Blub World Web Talks 169th episode. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing evening. Hi. Namaste.